July 2, 1943, Castel Vittorio Airfield, Sicily. The Focke-Wulf 190 pilot never noticed the P-40 Warhawk plunging down from the sun until the burst of .50 caliber fire ripped through his aircraft, sending it tumbling into the fields below. First Lieutenant Charles B. Hall, a 22-year-old from Brazil, Indiana, had just achieved something the German Luftwaffe considered unthinkable. A black American pilot had downed one of their premier fighters. The swastika that Hall painted on the side of his P-40L that day would be only the first of 112 enemy aircraft ultimately destroyed by the men whom German flyers would later reportedly call the Schwarzvogelmenschen, the Black Birdmen. In Nazi ideology, black people were deemed untermenschen, subhuman, supposedly incapable of handling advanced technology or showing valor in battle. The Nuremberg laws even prohibited Germans from marrying people of African descent. Yet over the Mediterranean that afternoon, such racist fantasy collided with undeniable reality. From Tuskegee, Alabama, 992 trained African-American pilots would soon dismantle not only German fighters but also the foundations of Nazi racial doctrine. What Luftwaffe pilots did not realize as they climbed to intercept U.S. bombers in 1943 was that they were flying toward a confrontation with some of the most thoroughly trained, intensely driven aviators in the entire U.S. Army Air Forces, men who had endured barriers their white counterparts never encountered, who had trained longer and harder than standard cadets, and who carried into battle not just the responsibilities of soldiers, but the additional weight of proving the capabilities of an entire race. The verdict of aerial warfare would soon be written across European skies: 15,000 sorties, 1,578 missions, 112 enemy aircraft downed, and a bomber escort loss rate markedly lower than that of white fighter groups. Numbers that forced even the most indoctrinated Nazi believers to confront the collapse of their racial theories. But the road to that first victory did not begin in combat, it began in the segregated United States. In 1925, the U.S. Army War College issued a report titled Employment of Negro Manpower in War, claiming, compared to the white man, he is admittedly of inferior mentality. He is inherently weak in character. The document insisted that black soldiers lacked the intellect for technical positions and the courage for combat leadership. Despite these official prejudices, evidence to the contrary already existed. Eugene Bullard had flown for France in World War I because America refused to let him serve. Bessie Coleman earned her pilot's license in France in 1921 after every American flying school rejected her. And by the 1930s, the Coffey School of Aeronautics in Chicago had trained dozens of black civilian pilots, proving that aviation skill was not tied to race. As war loomed in Europe, pressure for change in the United States only grew stronger. Civil rights leaders like Walter White of the NAACP, labor leader A. Philip Randolph and Judge William H. Hastie lobbied relentlessly for black inclusion in military aviation. Black newspapers, the Chicago Defender, the Pittsburgh Courier, the Baltimore Afro-American hammered the Roosevelt administration with a simple question: how could America fight for democracy abroad while denying it at home? On April 3, 1939, Public Law 18 finally cracked open the door. Senator Harry H. Schwartz had inserted an amendment requiring the civilian pilot training program to include one or more schools designated by the Civil Aeronautics Authority for the training of any Negro air pilot. It was a grudging concession wrapped in segregation, but it was a beginning. When Franklin Roosevelt ran for an unprecedented third term in 1940, he needed black votes in key northern cities. On January 16, 1941, Secretary of War Henry L. Stimson announced the formation of the 99th Pursuit Squadron, an all-black flying unit. The announcement came with a caveat that revealed the military's expectations. This would be an experiment to test whether blacks could be trained as combat pilots. Captain Benjamin O. Davis Jr. understood the weight of command when he led 26 pilots of the 99th Fighter Squadron to North Africa in April 1943. The son of America's first black general, Davis had endured 4 years of silent treatment at West Point, where no white cadet would speak to him outside of official duties. Now he commanded men who carried not just their own hopes, but the aspirations of 13 million black Americans. The 99th arrived at Farjuna, Tunisia, attached to the 33rd Fighter Group under Colonel William W. Mommy, a commander who made no secret of his skepticism about black pilots. Mier assigned them patrol missions over the Mediterranean, keeping them away from the real action. He wanted them to fail, and when they didn't immediately excel, he had his excuse. The morning of June 2, 1943 marked their first combat mission. An attack on the Italian-held island of Pantelleria. As their worn P-40 Warhawks climbed toward their targets, German fighters suddenly appeared. The Tuskegee pilots maintained tight formations, safeguarding the bombers under their protection. No planes were lost on either side, yet the Germans had learned a crucial lesson: these aviators would not falter under pressure. Everything changed on July 2, 1943. Charles Hall, on his 8th mission, was escorting B-25 Mitchell bombers targeting Castelvetrano airfield in Sicily. Two Focke-Wulf 190s closed in on the formation. Hall later recounted, "I saw two Focke-Wulfs trailing the bombers right after the bombs dropped. I maneuvered into the gap between them and the bombers and managed to turn inside the enemy. I fired a sustained burst and saw my tracers strike the second plane. It banked left, then suddenly fell, crashing straight to the ground." When Hall returned to base, the airfield erupted in celebration. Black ground crews, who had endured months of insults and doubt from white personnel, finally had tangible proof of their pilots' skill. Hall's victory marked the first aerial kill by a black American pilot in U.S. military history. By January 1944, the 99th Fighter Squadron had been engaged in combat for 7 months, yet Colonel Meyer submitted a scathing report claiming they lacked aggressiveness and recommending their removal from the front lines. The report reached General Henry Hap Arnold, who prepared to end the Tuskegee experiment until the events at Anzio. On January 27, 1944, the Luftwaffe unleashed massive attacks on Allied forces at the Anzio beachhead. 15 pilots from the 99th, flying outdated P-40s, faced superior Focke-Wulf 190s. Over the next 2 days, the squadron's performance would silence every critic. They shot down multiple enemy aircraft, sources vary from 8 to 13 victories. Captain Hall added 2 more kills, raising his total to 3. In just 2 days, flying inferior aircraft, the 99th destroyed more enemy planes than they had in the prior 7 months of combat. A subsequent War Department study compared their performance to other P-40 units and confirmed they were on par with white squadrons. The success at Anzio proved, beyond question, that black pilots could excel when given the opportunity. By May 1944, the 332nd Fighter Group, comprising the 99th, 100th, 301st, and 302nd Fighter Squadrons, received orders that would elevate them from marginalized units to legendary status. Assigned to the 15th Air Force, they would escort bombers on long, perilous missions deep into Nazi territory. At Ramitelli Airfield on Italy's Adriatic coast, Colonel Benjamin O. Davis Jr. addressed his pilots, "We cannot afford to lose bombers. Our mission is not to rack up kills. Our mission is to bring those bombers home." This principle became the foundation of their combat doctrine: protect the bombers at all costs. In June 1944, General Nathan Twining implemented a systematic color marking system for fighter groups. The 332nd was assigned red, not just red nose bands, but full tail sections painted crimson. Their P-51 Mustangs, with red tails, red propeller spinners, and red noses, became instantly recognizable in the skies, earning them the legendary nickname Red Tails. The first bomber crews to receive red tail escorts didn't know their protectors were black. They only knew that these fighters stayed close, never abandoning them for easy kills. Word spread through the bomber groups. Request the red tails if you can get them. July 18, 1944 would test the red tails like never before. Colonel Davis led 66 Mustangs to rendezvous with bombers targeting the Luftwaffe base at Memmingen, Germany. The bombers were late. Davis made a crucial decision: orbit in enemy territory rather than return to base. When the bombers finally appeared, so did the Luftwaffe, approximately 100 German fighters attacking from multiple directions. The Germans had learned that overwhelming numbers might break the Red Tail's protective screen. Despite fierce defense by the 332nd, who claimed 11 to 12 victories, 15 B-17 fell to enemy fighters in 20 minutes of savage combat. The 332nd lost 3 pilots: Lieutenants Robert Hutton, Wellington Irving, and Alfred Brown. Critics claimed the high bomber losses proved black pilots couldn't handle major battles. But operational analysis revealed the truth. The 332nd had arrived at an impossible situation with massive German forces already engaging the bombers. They had prevented complete disaster. By March 1945, the Luftwaffe's conventional fighters could barely challenge Allied air supremacy. But Germany had one last card. The Messerschmitt Me-262, the world's first operational jet fighter. With a top speed of 540 miles per hour, it could outrun any propeller-driven aircraft. On March 24, 1945, the 332nd Fighter Group received its most challenging assignment, escort bombers 1,600 miles round trip to Berlin to attack the Daimler-Benz tank factory. Intelligence warned that Mi-262s from Yamagata 7 would defend the target. Colonel Davis led 43 P-51 Mustangs into the heart of the Reich. As they approached Berlin, Mi-262s appeared, the largest jet fighter force ever assembled for a single interception. Lieutenant Roscoe Brown had studied the jet's weaknesses. "We knew the German jets were faster than we were. Instead of going directly after them, we went away from them and then turned into their blind spots," he explained. Brown shot down one Mi-262, reporting, "I pulled up at him in a 15 degrees climb and fired 3 long bursts from 2,000 feet at 8 o'clock to him. Almost immediately, the pilot bailed out from about 24,500 feet." Lieutenant Earl Lane performed what many considered impossible, shooting down an Mi-262 with a 2,000-yard deflection shot using the new K-14 computing gun sight. Lieutenant Charles Brantley claimed the third jet victory that day. The destruction of 3 Mi-262s in a single engagement represented more jets than most fighter groups would destroy in the entire war. The Red Tails had just exceeded the total of all previous American Mi-262 kills in one afternoon. The 332nd Fighter Group earned a Distinguished Unit Citation for this mission. Not all encounters between Tuskegee Airmen and Germans ended in victory. 32 pilots became prisoners of war, and their experiences revealed complex interactions between Nazi ideology and military reality. Lieutenant Alexander Jefferson was shot down on August 12, 1944 during his 19th mission. His P-51 took flak over southern France while strafing radar installations. At his interrogation, the German officer had extensive intelligence about the 332nd Fighter Group. The interrogator had information about Ramitelli Airfield, about our squadron commanders, even details about my parents' home in Detroit, Jefferson recalled. He knew my father was a teacher and my mother's maiden name. Their intelligence was frighteningly thorough. Inside Stalag Luft 3, Jefferson found himself treated like any other American officer. White PSWs from bomber crews often approached him with gratitude for red tail protection. These interactions, impossible in segregated America, occurred naturally in German prison camps. The irony wasn't lost on Jefferson. Here I was in a Nazi P camp, being treated more equally by white Americans than I would be back home. When the war ended and Jefferson returned to the United States, he was immediately segregated at the disembarkation point. While German pilots reportedly acknowledged the Red Tails' skill with the nickname Schwarze Vogelmenschen, American bomber crews became their most vocal champions. These men who faced death on every mission cared nothing about race, only survival. Bomber crews developed their own mythology about the Red Tails. Stories spread about their distinctive flying style, the way they waggled their wings in greeting, their tight formations, their refusal to abandon damaged bombers. Red Tail Angels became the bomber crew's name for them. The statistics supported the bomber crew's preferences. Research by Air Force historian Dr. Daniel Holman revealed that bombers under 332nd Fighter Group escort lost only 27 aircraft to enemy fighters compared to an average of 46 for other P-51 groups of the 15th Air Force. This superior protection rate occurred despite the Red Tails flying some of the longest and most dangerous missions of the war. By war's end, the Tuskegee Airmen had compiled a combat record that demolished every pre-war assumption about black military capability. Combat operations: 1,578 combat missions flown. 15,000 plus individual sorties completed. 179 bomber escort missions. 311 missions for the 15th Air Force. Enemy aircraft destroyed. 112 enemy aircraft destroyed in aerial combat. 150 enemy aircraft destroyed on the ground. 3 Mi-262 jet fighters shot down on March 24, 1945. Ground targets destroyed 950 rail cars, trucks, and motor vehicles. 254 locomotive engines. TA-22 former Italian destroyer Just Missouri damaged beyond repair on June 25, 1944. Protection record: 27 bombers lost to enemy fighters versus 46 average for other groups. Superior protection rate maintained across 179 escort missions. Individual achievements: Lee Archer, for confirmed victories. Joseph Elberry, for victories, including 3 FW-19s on July 12, 1944. Edward Toppins, for victories. Clarence Lewister, 3 kills in 1 mission, July 18, 1944. Decorations earned: 96 Distinguished Flying Crosses, 332nd Fighter Group pilots, 744 Air Medals, 14 Bronze Stars, 8 Purple Hearts, 3 Distinguished Unit Citations for the 99th Fighter Squadron, 1 Distinguished Unit Citation for the 332nd Fighter Group. Human cost: 66 pilots killed in action. 32 pilots captured as prisoners of war. 84 killed in training and non-combat missions. The transformation from mockery to respect wasn't just about courage. It reflected superior American training methods and technological advantages the Red Tails wielded with precision. At Tuskegee, pilots flew more hours than their white counterparts, 300 compared to 200 for white pilots. They practiced formation flying obsessively, knowing that in combat discipline would be their edge. The washout rate at Tuskegee was 60% compared to 40% for white cadets. Only the very best survived the program, creating what Colonel Noel Parrish, Tuskegee commander, called a super-selected group. The progression through aircraft types told its own story. The 99th began with hand-me-down P-40 Warhawks already obsolete when they arrived in North Africa. These liquid-cooled Allison engine fighters were inferior to German Bf-19s and FW-19s in almost every performance metric. Yet the Tuskegee pilots used the P-40's superior turning ability and rugged construction to hold their own. The arrival of P-51 Mustangs in July 1944 transformed the Red Tails into equals of any fighter unit in the war. The North American P-51D Mustang represented American industrial perfection. Its Packard-built Merlin engine gave it a top speed of 437 miles per hour. Its 650 caliber machine guns could destroy any aircraft. Most importantly, its range, over 1,600 m with drop tanks, allowed it to escort bombers anywhere in the Reich. Behind every pilot who shot down a German aircraft stood dozens of support personnel, mechanics, armorers, crew chiefs who kept the Red Tails flying. Of the approximately 16,000 Tuskegee Airmen who served, fewer than 1,000 were pilots. The rest were the unsung heroes who made victory possible. The ground crews worked miracles with limited resources. Ramitelli Airfield in Italy was primitive compared to other American bases. Spare parts were scarce, with the 332nd often last in line for supplies. Yet their aircraft availability rate, the percentage of planes ready for combat, equaled or exceeded that of white units. These ground crews also faced combat. German raids on Ramitelli were rare but deadly. On March 24, 1944, a German bombing raid killed several support personnel. The men continued working through the attack, pulling aircraft away from burning fuel dumps. The strategic bombing campaign over Europe provided the ultimate testing ground for the Tuskegee Airmen. Each B-17 Flying Fortress cost $238,000 and carried 10 highly trained crew members. The loss of a single bomber represented a strategic setback that rippled through the entire war effort. This is why bomber protection mattered more than aerial victories. Colonel Davis understood this when he ordered his pilots to resist the temptation to chase German fighters. "Anyone can shoot down a fighter if they abandon their post," he said. "It takes discipline to stay with the bombers when the enemy is running." The Red Tails' escort tactics evolved through experience. They developed a 3-layer defense. Close escort weaving directly above the bombers, medium escort positioned to intercept incoming fighters, and high escort watching for diving attacks. This system required precise coordination and absolute discipline. The Tuskegee Airmen fought 2 wars simultaneously against fascism abroad and racism at home. Their record in combat not only confronted Nazi racial dogma but also exposed the fallacies of segregation in the United States, proving that skill and valor in the air transcended race. While the Tuskegee Airmen engaged German forces overseas, they simultaneously battled discrimination at home. Their victories against the Luftwaffe were celebrated in black newspapers but were often downplayed or ignored by mainstream media. The Pittsburgh Courier's double V campaign, Victory Abroad Against Fascism and Victory at Home Against Racism, highlighted the Tuskegee Airmen as emblematic heroes. The contrast in recognition was striking. By 1945, German pilots reportedly knew the red-tailed Mustangs by sight, calling their crews Schwarzvogelmenschen, yet many white Americans remained unaware that black pilots even existed. This omission was deliberate. The War Department seldom publicized the airmen's achievements. Victory in Europe brought little fanfare for the 332nd Fighter Group. While white units prepared for victory parades, the Tuskegee Airmen faced uncertainty about their future as the Army Air Forces continued to enforce segregation despite overwhelming evidence of its absurdity. For decades, mainstream America remained largely oblivious to their accomplishments. Individual pilots wrestled with this erasure. Lee Archer, credited with 4 aerial victories, went on to work as a corporate executive but rarely spoke of his wartime service. "Nobody believed me anyway," he reflected. "A black fighter pilot must be lying." Progress came slowly. In 1948, President Harry Truman signed Executive Order 9981, integrating the U.S. military, a decision influenced in part by the airmen's performance. Benjamin O. Davis, Jr., who had led the Red Tails over Berlin, became the Air Force's first black general in 1954. Broader recognition followed even later. In 2007, President George W. Bush awarded the Congressional Gold Medal to the surviving Tuskegee Airmen, only about 300 of whom were alive to receive it over 6 decades after their wartime heroism. Their record remains indisputable: 112 aerial victories over the Luftwaffe, 3 Mi-262 jets destroyed in a single mission, 150 enemy planes eliminated on the ground, and bomber loss rates lower than the average for other units. The 332nd Fighter Group earned 96 Distinguished Flying Crosses, and the men who had been derided as the Schwarzvogelmenschen proved that prejudice collapses when confronted with undeniable capability. Every downed German fighter, every escorted bomber, every completed sortie reinforced a simple truth: skill in the air knows no color. Roscoe Brown, who shot down a German jet over Berlin, summed it up: "We didn't just fight the Germans. We fought ignorance, prejudice, and hatred. And we won all 3 battles." The Tuskegee Airmen did more than win wars, they reshaped history. They fought 3 conflicts at once, defeating the Luftwaffe in combat, dismantling Nazi racial ideology through excellence, and ultimately undermining American segregation by proving their ability beyond doubt. When given the chance to soar, they transformed derision into respect, bias into acknowledgement, and skepticism into admiration, leaving a legacy that changed both a nation and a world.